Ravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihare Jaya Sri Radha Govardhana Dari ki, Sri Krishna Balaram, Sri Giriraj Govardhana ki. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. We're reading from Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 7, text 129 and 130. So please bear with me. Bengali pronunciation here. We'll do our best. Savashraya Ishvarya Pranava Udesha Tattvamarshi Vakya Hoya Vidira Ekadesha Pranava Mahavakya Tahakari Achadana Mahavakye Kari Tattva Marshira Shtapana Sava Asraya, the reservoir of everything. Ishvareya, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pranava, Omkara, Udesha, Purpose. Tattvamasi. The Vedic mantra. Tattvam asi. You are the same. Vakya. Statement. Hoya. Becomes. Vedera. Of the Vedic literature. Ekadesha. Partial understanding. Translation. It is the purpose of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to present Pranav, Omkara, as the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. The words Tattvam Asi are only a partial explanation of the Vedic knowledge. One line purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Tattvam Asi means you are the same spiritual identity. Text 130. Pranava. Omkara. Mahavakya. Principle. Mantra. Principle mantra. Taha. That. Kari. Making. Achadana. Covered. Mahavakya. In place of the principle mantra. Kari, I do. Tattvam ashira shtapana. Establishment of the statement Tattvam ashi. Translation and purport. Pranava, Omkara, is the Mahavakya or Mahamantra in the Vedas. Shankaracharya's followers cover this to stress without authority the mantra Tattvam Ashi. Purport. Mayavadi philosophers stress the statements Tattvam Asi, So Aham, etc. But they do not stress the real Mahamantra Pranava, Omkara. Therefore, because they misrepresent Vedic knowledge, they are the greatest offenders to the lotus feet of the Lord. Caitanya Mahaprabhu says clearly, Mayavadi Krishna Aparadi. Mayavadi philosophers are the greatest offenders to Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna declares, Bhagavad Gita 16:19, those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest amongst mankind, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Life in demoniac species awaits the Mayavadi philosophers after death because they are envious of Krishna. When Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 9:34, Manmana bhava madbhakto madjajimam namaskuru, engage your mind always in thinking of me, offer obeisances and worship me. One demoniac scholar says that it is not Krishna to whom one must surrender. The scholar is already suffering in this life, and he will have to suffer again in the next life if, in this life, he does not complete his prescribed suffering. Hare Krishna. One should be very careful not to be envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, therefore, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu clearly states the purpose of the Vedas. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmanitam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master has very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Mukam karoti vachalam bhangum langhayate ganim yat kripa tamaham vande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, the saviour of all fallen souls. By his grace, even a lame man can cross over mountains, a blind man can see stars in the sky, and a dumb man can recite eloquent Vedic poetry. So this is a very long chapter and a very important chapter in the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. We're nearing its conclusion. We will go through for, there's still quite a few verses to go. Up to text 171. So 171 shlokas in this very important chapter, because this is a wonderful conversation between Lord Chaitanya and Prakashananda Saraswati, the leader of all the Mayavadi sannyasis of Benares 500 years ago. Roy Ramananda Samvad is another great conversation. Samvad means conversation, and there are many wonderful conversations throughout Vedic literature. There's also the Devahuti Samvad, the conversation between Lord Kapila Dev and his mother, Devahuti. So, and this is yet another wonderful conversation between Lord Chaitanya and Prakashananda Saraswati. And we'll see, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is using wonderful arguments to convince Prakashananda Saraswati that bhakti, Krishna bhakti, is far superior to his misconception based on the erroneous teachings of Sripad Shankaracharya, which actually deprives the jiva of many wonderful opportunities. And Mahaprabhu, of course, being the greatest of all scholars and the Supreme Lord, by all the Vedas I am to be known. And Krishna says, indeed I am the compiler of the Vedas and I am the knower of the Vedas as well. Vedaschai saveraham eva vejo vedanta krit vedanta vit eva chaham. So when Krishna appeared again just 500 years ago as Mahaprabhu, he had a mission, and that was to enlighten whoever was fortunate enough, as well as regathering up all of the Lord's eternal associates who had taken birth along with him, either preceding him as his elders, personalities like Namacharya Haridas Thakur and his own beloved parents, Jagannath Misra and Sachimata, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Dvaitaracharya. So many elders were there, and then of course many appeared who were the contemporaries of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and enjoyed unlimited transcendental bliss in pastimes with the Lord. And as Mahaprabhu travelled throughout the length and breadth of the subcontinent of India, he was gathering up all of these eternal associates. And one by one, it appears that they underwent conversions. That can be described as pastime or lila. And of course we can read about them with great awe and veneration and become convinced ourselves of the veracity of Krishna Bhakti over and above all other philosophies and lifestyles. And Mahaprabhu demonstrated how unless one is getting a higher taste, it's very hard to convince someone to actually be bothered preaching unless one is convinced that one's lifestyle, one's spiritual path, everyone should be doing. So that is the impetus for a devotee being bothered to go out into the world and to attempt to give the bliss of Krishna consciousness to others. Unless we have that profound conviction, as Srila Prabhupada did. As one devotee praised Srila Prabhupada on one occasion, Srila Prabhupada, you're always so enthusiastic. And Prabhupada said, yes, I've always been enthusiastic. If I wasn't enthusiastic, how is I could have come to your country at such an old age? So those convinced against their will remain of the same opinion still. So Mahaprabhu's pastimes, of course, we follow in his lotus footprints, not imitating, but merely doing what he did to the best of our limited capacity. He walked barefoot all over India for 6 years, visiting all of the principal holy places and many smaller villages, and performing the Yugadharma, Harinam Sankirtan, wherever he went. It's said that many great souls, they worship this age of Kali, because they know, even though Kali Desha Nideh Rajan Asti Heko Mahagunan Caitanya Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Brajet. That even though this age of Kali is an ocean of faults, there's one great quality, Mahagunan, and that is simply by performing this kirtan, which is so delightful to do. Music is a very important part of bhakti. And so simply singing, dancing is so delightful, and hearing a little something about Krishna. We achieve all perfection in a very short space of time, unlike other ages where aspiring transcendentalists would have to perform severe austerities for many, many years. In this age, in the short span of life that we have, we can achieve all perfection and go back to the spiritual world. So, the personality that Srila Prabhupada is referring to in this purport was a very important man of his time in India. And I'm going to attempt to show how Mahabhagavat Uttama Adhikari, devotees of Krishna like Srila Prabhupada, they personify the genuine qualities of sadhus. And again, in the Devahuti Samvad, Lord Kapila her own son, explains that Titikshasva Karunika Surida Savadehinam. The genuine sadhus, devotees of the Lord, they are very tolerant, Titikshasva. They're also extremely merciful, Karunika, and they're the best friends of all living entities, Surit. So, Prabhupada, as a world acharya of Vaishnavism, coming out of Vrindavan in his later years and travelling extensively, he came into contact with many different personalities. That's what a preacher has to do. Prabhupada said once that a sannyasi and a businessman must travel. The businessman, of course, to make new customers and to sell more of his products, and the sannyasi to expand the Achyuta Gotra, or the family of Krishna's devotees, to make more devotees. So, in the course of Prabhupada's widespread travelling and preaching, he encountered many personalities, and many of them were spiritual seekers, no doubt. But many would have misconceptions about spiritual life, and some of them very profound. I think there are music schools in Europe where the tuition fees are much higher if you've already thought you knew how to play the piano or the violin or the cello. Then they charge you more because they've got to untrain you. They've got to reteach you how to properly play that instrument. Whereas if you go there, you say, I've never touched the keys on a piano, but I want to learn. Okay, then they'll train you properly from the get-go, if we can use that expression. So, of course, since the time of Sripad Shankaracharya and earlier, there have always been hardcore impersonalists and Mayavadis. Shankaracharya was by no means the first. There have always been great rishis and thoughtful persons coming up with different philosophies. It is said that a muni can't be a muni unless he or she comes up with a different philosophy, a new philosophy. They can agitate their mind in so many different ways to come up with some new fantastic philosophy. But traditionally, there is the Vaishnava Siddhanta and Tattva, which is eternal, the Bhakti Marg. So in the course of Prabhupada's travelling, he would meet many personalities, and he actually showed them extreme mercy. He wasn't in any way intimidated by even the most learned Vedantist of the Mayavad school. And this particular personality, Dr. Radhakrishnan, was born in South India in a Brahmin family. He was very well educated. And he became the first vice president of India after India finally gained her independence from the British in 1947. He wasn't the first president, but he was the first vice president, and then he was the second president. And he also served as an ambassador for India to, could have even been the US and also the United Nations. So he was a very important man of his time. And Prabhupada used to write to him in his earlier, when Prabhupada was preaching in India prior to coming to the West, he was writing to so many of the big men in India, Mahatma Gandhi and so many of the political leaders, trying to interest them in Mahaprabhu's teachings. And even when Prabhupada was in New York, before he managed to get his own manuscript and commentary on Bhagavad Gita published by Macmillan and Co., Prabhupada was forced to use Dr. Radhakrishnan's English translation and commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada said the translation of the verses, Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and were accurate, because after all he was a Sanskrit scholar, but his commentary was bogus. And this is the principal verse that Prabhupada took extreme exception to, and that is the famous verse, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, etc. And I think in that verse, we've been through once or twice, and that not less than 5 times and possibly 6 times, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, and he's speaking in the first person. Always think of me, become my devotee. Bow down and offer your obeisances to me. Being fully absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So it's very hard to give a misleading, impersonal interpretation to that, yet due to envy, that's kind of like, that's the reason the jiva leaves Krishna's company in the first instance. It's due to envy. Krishna's the supreme enjoyer, but he's never enjoying alone, and only the most hard-hearted of all the Mayavadis, they like to depict Krishna on his own, sometimes even in black and white, just with an Om sign behind the Lord. Nowhere to be seen is even a cow or a peacock, what to speak of the Lord's consort, Sri Radha, and the other gopis and cowherd boys or other associates. It's very impersonal. Impersonalism is very dry, and it's very hard, for example, to have a relationship with the sky or the ocean. As beautiful as they may be, it's very hard to have a relationship, but infinitely more appealing and relishable and sweet are relationships. So that is, and we find that in bhakti, whereas Mayavad precludes any possibility of having a loving relationship with the Supreme. That's very unfortunate. We thrive on relationships. They're natural. Similarly, another flaw, and there are innumerable flaws in Mayavad philosophy, and whole books have been written by our predecessor, Vaishnavacharyas, in both the Madhva and Ramanuja Sampradayas, as well as our wonderful Gaudiya Acharyas, have point by point gone through refuting the erroneous conclusions of Shankaracharya's Mayavad misinterpretation of Vedic wisdom. Just like if we are all the Supreme, then again, if I am God, then what am I meant to do? Have a relationship with myself? It's very unfortunate philosophy, but this philosophy is, of course, being spread very effectively, and many people do adhere to it. So, but Prabhupada showed Dr. Radhakrishnan extreme mercy. At the end of the doctor's life, actually, Shyamasundar Prabhu has written how he went with Prabhupada in Madras on one occasion, and he made an appointment and went to see Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was not enjoying good health at the end of his life, as Prabhupada indicated here. But Prabhupada nonetheless went and saw him, and the elderly doctor was being nursed by one of his daughters. And Prabhupada tried to pick up his spirits a little bit, and they had an exchange, but the elderly doctor was so incapacitated that he could barely speak, which is very unfortunate. But Prabhupada showed him great kindness. Lava matra sadhu sangha sava siddhi hoy. At the end of his life, even though he was very envious of Krishna, Prabhupada took the trouble to actually go and show him mercy, which is really extraordinary. So kind, and because he was an important man. And so Prabhupada did that, and even though there was very little conversation from the doctor's side to Prabhupada, right at the end, as the daughter said to Prabhupada and Shyamasundar, he has to take rest now. So that was the wind-up signal for their meeting. But right at the end, Dr. Radhakrishna said to Prabhupada, please pray to God for me. And I'm sure Prabhupada did that. And there are many other wonderful personalities who were very fortunate to come into close connection with Srila Prabhupada during his life, and personalities that, like Dr. Misra in New York, who also allowed Prabhupada to stay in a small office space he was renting in a building in New York City for some time. And Dr. Misra was not enjoying very good health, and Prabhupada had his 3 or 4 tier cooker, and every day Prabhupada was cooking his own lunch for himself, and he made enough that when Dr. Misra was around, that Dr. Misra could also honour Prabhupada's cooking, prasadam. And we know Prabhupada used to make a very delicious and nutritious lunch every day. Rice, dal, often 2 sabjis and chapatis. And Dr. Dr. Misra later commented that his health improved dramatically after eating Prabhupada's delicious lunch every day. So Prabhupada essentially nursed him back to good health. Murari Gupta is one of the associates of Mahaprabhu, and he was an Ayurvedic doctor, and he could cure both his patients' material ailments and their spiritual ills as well. So Prabhupada was able to do that with the fortunate Dr. Misra. But Dr. Misra was also a Mayavadi of Shankara's line. But he used to invite Prabhupada up to, he had an ashram actually. He'd been in America for some time and had established himself. And he had an ashram in a small country estate, a house in upstate New York. And he used to invite Prabhupada up there once or twice. And Prabhupada would meet with some of Dr. Misra's students, and of course he would try to convince them of the Vaishnava philosophy, which Dr. Misra used to get a little bit annoyed with Prabhupada, and at one point he may have even told Prabhupada, you can't speak, you can lead kirtan, but you can't speak, because, and sometimes Dr. Misra would speak and Prabhupada would have to tolerate, and then Dr. Misra would say, now Swamiji will sing us a song. And he would lead Prabhupada would lead the devotees in kirtan. So these wonderful pastimes from early days. And the other, actually, another doctor. There are three doctors. The last doctor is Dr. Patel. And Prabhupada used to walk, whenever he was in Bombay, now Mumbai, Prabhupada would take a morning walk on Juhu Beach, just a couple of blocks across from where his magnificent Hare Krishna land, Radha Rasa Bihari Mandir, was being constructed in Bombay. And Prabhupada would not be alone on the beach early in the morning, taking morning walk. There would be many hundreds and hundreds of other people exercising. And one of the personalities and his friends who befriended Srila Prabhupada during those morning walks was one retired Dr. Patel. And he also admitted to Prabhupada that he was born in a Vaishnava family, but at some point in his life he had a conversion to Shankar's Mayavad teaching. So, and he used to argue with Prabhupada, and he was a very learned person, so they used to have vociferous debates back and forth. And sometimes it would appear that Dr. Patel was having a change of heart. He was warming to Prabhupada's arguments, and essentially it was reviving something deep in his heart, possibly from his childhood. But then again, he would revert the next morning back to championing the cause of impersonalism. So, and some of the devotees accompanying Prabhupada on those morning walks were getting quite agitated, and would say, Prabhupada, this Dr. Patel, sometimes he seems favourable, and other times he argues. We don't know what he really is. And Prabhupada said, that's very common in India. And he said, there's a way you can find out what he really is. And Prabhupada told a little story of one man who was multilingual, spoke numerous languages, and used to like to show off to people if he met someone who spoke a different language, foreign language, then that man could converse fluently in that language. He knew so many. But none of his associates knew what was his original language. So then someone figured out, the way we can find out is, and what they did was they walked behind this man on one occasion, they slapped him really hard on the back, and immediately, startled, he spoke in what was his mother tongue. Yeah. So Prabhupada said, we can do that philosophically, so to speak. We can try to do it with Dr. Patel, find out whether he's really a hardcore Mayavadi or whether he's actually deep down a Vaishnava. But Prabhupada showed him also extreme mercy. And there are many others. We read about in Vrindavan, there was one Prem Yogi who was coming. He was also a very learned person. And Prabhupada, during Hari Sori's tenure as Prabhupada's servant, writes extensively about this particular man coming. And Prabhupada engaged this man, who was vastly learned in some translation work, and trained him for some time. He may not have stayed, but at least for some time Prabhupada did his best. He even allowed Prem Yogi on one occasion to speak, and Prem Yogi sort of went off into Mayavad territory, and Prabhupada had to cut him off. So that's enough. And then kept talking. So it's really interesting how pure unalloyed devotees, they can be simultaneously very heavy. These are very heavy words Prabhupada's quoting here, but simultaneously like a thunderbolt. But at the same time they can be as soft as rose petals. We caught up with Prabhu Dasarakari yesterday and thanked him for his wonderful service, because he has some experience growing roses, and roses are not easy to grow especially in tropical or subtropical climates. So we thanked him for his service, many of us who were talking with him. growing so many at this time of year, of course, so many beautiful roses which Our Lady's stringing into delightful garlands, and to be able to offer Srila Prabhupada a beautiful garland of multi-varieties of flowers. So rose petals, very, very delightful, very soft. Sometimes the acharya can be very strong as well. And Prabhupada also told on one occasion the story of the blue jackal. The story is mentioned, it's very famous in India. It's mentioned in the Panchatantra, which is the basis of Aesop's fables. Some of us as children, you're not sure if children still read Aesop's fables, but Panchatantra, and anyway, another book very famous. But once upon a time, there was a jackal, and it was snooping around in the backyard of a washerman's house, and it accidentally fell into a vat of bright blue dye, indigo, and startled it, dragged itself out, ran back into the forest. The next morning it realized it was a completely different color. And as the sun rose and the other forest animals came around, they were startled. They'd never seen such a creature before. And they were even inquiring, "Oh, beautiful creature, who are you?" And jackals are very cunning, like foxes. So the blue jackal sensed an opportunity here to make his life a little bit easier. He immediately said, "Oh, I am a representative of Indra. I have come from the heavenly abode to bless you all. Oh, that's wonderful. Dear heavenly creature, what can we do to please you? How can we serve you?" And the blue jackal said, "Well, you just feed me. You just bring me whatever types of foodstuffs you normally capture and eat or harvest from the forest." So all the other forest animals, they did that for some time, and life was good for the blue jackal. Jackals are basically scavengers. Krishna Rupa, I think, do they still have jackals in Mayapur? Yes. You hear them, and they don't have a very pleasant call at night. But yes, eerie. So, and they have a hard life, jackals. So life was good for this blue jackal for some time. But then one day, way off in the distance, there was a pack of jackals, and they started howling. And the blue jackal couldn't help himself. He howled back. And all the other forest creatures realized, he's a jackal. And they jumped on him, and needless to say, it didn't end well for the jackal, the blue jackal. So Prabhupada, when he told this story, he lumped in a few different of his favorite personalities for intense criticism, the Mayavadis, and also materialistic, atheistic scientists. Prabhupada had no problem with theistic science. He utilized all the technologies of his time, even complimenting scientists that they've been able to create non-leather shoes, synthetic fibers and fabrics, so that sadhus traditionally don't wear any leather. So Prabhupada said, this is very nice. Science has created these synthetic products they can make, so we don't have to wear any leather products. But atheistic scientists and Mayavadis, and so Prabhupada explained that just like you can put a dog on the throne of a king, but as soon as you throw an old boot down, then the dog will immediately jump off the throne and investigate, because that's what dogs do. That's their nature. So similarly, the blue jackal was exposed as being a charlatan, fraudulent, and So, of course, one has to be very discriminating in life, even on the spiritual path, most essentially on the spiritual path. One has to use one's keen powers of discrimination. Doubt is a function of intelligence. Is it a rope? Is it a snake? I'm doubting. Doubt can save our life. Rather than picking up something that we think is just a piece of rope and getting bitten, we should investigate, we should doubt. So, of course, Vaishnavism, we have so many wonderful acharyas. Srila Prabhupada was representing an illustrious line. Just like you will not find, we've heard, with good recommendation, we may not have the time or the inclination to go through, for example, all of the 108 principal Upanishads. But our predecessor acharyas have taken the trouble to do that, and they've told us, for example, Srila Jiva Goswami, that nowhere in the Upanishads will you find the jiva described as, we have the term aham brahmasmi, yeah? I'm spirit, I'm not this body. So nowhere in the Upanishads will you find the expression aham param brahmasmi. You just won't find it. Because it's not there. Excuse me?
Which expression?
Aham param brahmasmi. Yeah. Param Brahman is Krishna, right? That's Arjuna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavam, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhum. You are the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, the Supreme Abode and Purifier, the original Divine Person. All the great sages such as Asita, Devala, Vyas, they have proclaimed this about you, and now you yourself are saying it to me. So Krishna is always known as Param Brahman, or the Supreme. We're also divine personalities, but we're not the Supreme Divine Personality. That unique position belongs to Krishna. I remember somebody asking a question once, are Gaudiya Vaishnavas monotheistic? Do we worship one Supreme God as opposed to polytheistic? And it is a fact that we are monotheistic. We worship the Supreme Lord. But Krishna has many expansions. And sometimes persons become a little, who are just approaching the threshold of bhakti, may become a little curious. How is that? For example, in Caitanya Caritamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has explained that Advaita Acharya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshipped Shalagram Shila, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to request Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to descend. So that can be a little interesting. But he of course explains how Krishna is so merciful that he appears in many different incarnations. Iti chamsa kalo pumsam krishnastu bhagavan swayam. Swayam Bhagavan is Shamasunda Govinda Gopinath Krishna. But from him, just as many candles can be lit, but there still is one original candle from whom all the others are lit. So we've managed to get to the end of time. Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions or comments, please, or corrections? Krishna. Kali Krishna. There's a microphone there, Prabhu, if you want to, and then it'll be broadcast far and wide.
I'd like to plethora of examples of that Prabhupada, the first Prabhupada immediately took him to task. You have said it's the impersonal we have to surrender to. Where is that stated by Krishna? Radha Krishna couldn't answer.
It's okay. It's a good. Yeah. No, I think I admitted to say that. Yes. It was Dr. Radhakrishna's. It's not in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada objected to so much. It's not to the person Krishna. I think Prabhupada mentions that. It's not to the personality of Krishna, but it's to the unborn, unmanifested within Krishna. So that's very offensive, yeah, to devotees.
I had a question.
That's all right. It might come back as if anyone else has got a comment. Yeah, please, Krishna Rupa. Yeah, we'll come back to you, Prabhu.
It might be a long time.
That's all right.
Thank you so much for the class. As we were talking about Dr. Patel, I really find it very difficult listening to those morning walks because he's so argumentative and belligerent. And wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't in the end it become so, the devotees were so concerned about the apparatus Dr. Patel was making that Prabhupada said, okay, let's just read Krishna book. So they would walk along the beach in Mumbai, in Juhu, and read Krishna book just so Dr. Patel wouldn't be so effective. And once again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the end Dr. Patel begged forgiveness to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, I have heard those stories. No, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. And I have read that in Mumbai in those days, there was one English devotee, brahmachari, who was very well educated in one of the most prestigious private schools in the UK, and he spoke the Queen's English perfectly, and he was the devotee. And Prabhupada actually initiated that program where a devotee would bring Krishna book along on the morning walks, and this English devotee would, if they saw Dr. Patel coming some mornings, Prabhupada would just encourage the reading of the Krishna book, and Dr. Patel would have to listen to that also and get purified. Yes, and like many people who may have had philosophical disagreements with Prabhupada, but later on, due to that intimate association, again, one moment's association with a pure unalloyed devotee, achieve all perfection. Yeah, many of those people did have a change of heart. They realised actually their inestimable good fortune at the time, but sometimes it took a little while. Kalia, has it come back? Anyone else?
I did a point that you made in your last presentation. It was really well presented. You just mentioned about doubt as a function of intelligence. So there seems to be two sides that you have to balance there, because Krishna criticises the doubting propensity that if you doubt too much, you won't attain perfection. How are we to discriminate and how much doubt we should utilise?
Well, Krishna consciousness is so nice that if we do practice it properly, then in course of time, and sometimes it can be very rapid, we see devotees sometimes join Krishna consciousness, and there's no doubt, that they've practiced bhakti in their previous lifetime, because they immediately take to the process and they're very enthusiastic, and they become very committed and solid devotees. That's a new word I'm learning. Once upon a time it was fixed up devotees, right? Krishna Rupa, but now he's a solid devotee. So that's okay. We want to be solid. So solidish. But we see that, and they just don't have, and such jivas already advanced in devotion, they have very little doubt, and they're just absolutely convinced of everything from day one. Other jivas may not be on that level, and they take some convincing. I think in biblical terms you had doubting Thomas, right? He's a doubting Thomas. He just wasn't able to commit. And the other thing is we do have, just as we have, there may be demoniac forces externally, we also have demons within, if you like, the demons of doubt. Sometimes they're described. Is Krishna really God? Maybe I should be doing something else with my life apart from rendering all this service. But again, the beauty of bhakti is we do get a taste. We should get a taste if we follow the program nicely. Then we get such a taste that any thoughts of going back to a materialistic lifestyle, they just evaporate. Maya may try and tug here and pull there and bewitch and bewilder here and there, but a devotee who's relishing bhakti rasa, he or she will just, this materialistic lifestyle. I gave it up once. I really want to go back and try to chew the tube. Just like, I think nowadays they have very compact juices which can even juice sugar cane, isn't it? We were selling sugar cane juice here for a while at the Sunday feast. Very powerful juices. In India, of course, many of us are aware there's still old-fashioned sugar cane juicing machines. We don't recommend the devotees drink that. Not very hygienic. Even though the walla may say, "Oh, very hygienic." He's washing in the same glass, in the same dirty water. So not recommended for health reasons. And you see, after the sugar cane has been crushed through the machine, all the juice has been squeezed out of it, and then it's thrown somewhere else. And some lowly creatures, some different creatures will come and try to suck some juice from it. So the definition of insanity: to do the same things again and again and again and expect to get a different result, isn't it? Definition of insanity. So we've gone a little bit over time. Thank you, everyone. Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.